The mud-covered creature in Oliver's hand held a strange appeal to him. All of his problems were rooted in it, but they hadn't even begun yet. Originally, Oliver built his pond to impress his wife and be a sight to behold. As things went wrong, he became concerned and sought to find out why. The discovery led him to hospitalization, which he had no idea would happen. Oliver had served in the military his entire life. His retirement had finally come, but now he couldn't just sit back and enjoy the simple things. He was driven insane by the desire to keep busy until he came up with a brilliant idea with his wife, Emily. It had been a long-held dream of his to redo their garden, and finally he had the chance to do so. Due to their rural location and the fact that they had devoted the majority of their property to the garden, reworking their garden would be a huge undertaking. Despite the challenge, Oliver was up for it. Emily had been looking forward to building her own vegetable garden for a long time. His dream pond became a reality after years of planning and building. Oliver worked extremely hard over the following months to fulfill their dreams. As a result, he became incredibly proud of his garden, that he was most fond of the pond, and was almost ready for the fish. Oliver realized something wasn't right one morning when he woke up. Neither he nor his wife could explain why this was happening. Despite extensive internet searches, he wasn't able to find the reason why his water lilies were dying. One day they were perfectly fine, but the next day they didn't even have a chance of surviving. As Oliver inserted the new lilies, he kept an eye on them. A realization dawned on him at that moment, and the day following the addition of his koi fish and new lilies, Oliver realized that a few of the lilies had disappeared. There were just a few left, and they were just opening. His surprise to Emily was ruined now that he knew he couldn't use them. Not only the lilies disappeared, but so did other items as well, so they could be easily identified. Oliver made sure each koi fish looked different when he purchased them. It turned out that his pure white koi was also missing. In a state of utter confusion, Oliver looked around. What could cause an entire koi fish to vanish so suddenly? Did the lilies and fish have any connection? As he went out the next morning to feed his fish, Oliver still wasn't sure what was happening. Things got stranger from there. Another koi went missing. The lilies, however, were fine. As a result of his confusion, Oliver returned to the house and searched online again, who or what took advantage of koi fish and lilies for food. Oliver's pond had been completely empty for a week due to the strange occurrence that happened every day. Once again, the lilies became the target when all the fish were gone. He had just built the pond of his dreams a week earlier, but now it was just a watery pit. It had been devastating for Oliver to see his pond destroyed by a disaster. The only thing he wanted for his wife and himself was a nice water feature and some colorful fish. As a result, the pond ended up causing more trouble than it was worth. In addition to spending a small fortune on building it, Oliver had to spend a considerable amount on the fish as well. However, at that point, he felt like he had wasted all his money. The worst part was that Oliver still didn't know what was causing the problem. According to the internet, there was no predator that ate both water lilies and koi fish. Since that was the case, he decided to check the pH levels of the water. That was normal as well. Plus, his fish seemed to vanish, not just die. So, there had to be more to it. Oliver stared at his pond and sighed. Of all the things he had managed to do in his garden, the pond took the most work. It had taken him months to make it look perfect. He dug the hole himself. He lined it with his bare hands. Every single rock was placed in the spot he wanted it to be. And for what? Just so he could look at a muddy puddle. No, Oliver wouldn't accept that. He wanted that pond, and he would have it. He just needed to find out what was causing the problem. But since all the life that was in the pond was gone, nothing seemed to be happening. However, what he was looking for wasn't on the surface. It was lurking in the muddy depths. Weeks had passed since the incident, but nothing had happened since. However, on one sunny morning, all that changed. Oliver and Emily were enjoying some time in the sun when the water in the pond moved. Emily jumped out of her seat when she heard it, but Oliver was intrigued. He didn't see anything moving, but he heard the splash loud and clear. At this point, Oliver was convinced that there was something in his pond, and he knew that whatever it was had been doing something to his fish and water plants. Oliver wanted to find out what it was, and he wanted to get rid of it, so he could have the pond he always dreamed of. But things wouldn't be as easy as they seemed. As Emily ran into the house, Oliver cautiously approached the pond. He was hyper alert and looking out for any and all signs of life, but there were none. He grabbed a stick that he kept close by and used it to move around the water. However, it didn't matter how much he agitated the thing. It didn't move again. Oliver had just about had enough. He pulled his stick out of the water and leaned against it, hoping something would happen. He stood in silence for a few minutes, and suddenly the water moved again. Oliver couldn't make out what was causing the ripples, but he would have his hands on it eventually. And when he did, its hunting days would be over. The instant Oliver saw the movement, he got to work. He opened the valve he had installed and watched as the water slowly drained from his pond. It took a few hours for the water to drain out completely, but Oliver was willing to wait. He had a nice lunch with his wife, and when they were done, there was no water left. Oliver stood on the edge of the pond and looked down. The floor was covered in mud, but that wasn't what had Oliver scratching his head. There was absolutely nothing in there. How could that be? He had seen the movement with his own eyes. How could the creature that caused it just disappear? Oliver thought about it for a moment before realizing that it didn't disappear. The creature was still there, but it was hiding in the mud. Convinced, Oliver got down into the pond and started digging through the mud. He felt around for a while, and then he saw it. The mud in the corner moved. Oliver got up and poked the creature with his stick, making it move again. When the creature moved again, it lifted its head and hissed. Oliver was caught off guard and jumped back, clutching his heart as it started beating in overdrive. It took him a few minutes to recover from the shock and catch his breath. But Oliver managed after a while, and immediately got back to work. Oliver carefully approached the creature once more, but as he got closer, the creature leaped toward him. Acting on instinct, Oliver's hand shot out, and he grabbed onto the animal. It wasn't what he was hoping for, but now that he had it in his grasp, he might as well get a look at it to see what it was. Oliver ran a finger over the creature's smooth skin. Some of the mud that was covering it fell to the ground, and Oliver saw two small eyes looking him over. He couldn't understand what he was looking at since it wasn't anything he had ever seen before. But the mud was also hiding a lot of distinctive features, so Oliver decided to wash it before he continued his examination. Oliver held onto the creature's head and hosed it down before kneeling down next to it to get a closer look. What an odd sight, Oliver thought to himself. The thing he was holding looked like a snake, but it wasn't any snake he had seen before, and there was something about it that didn't look right. Upon closer inspection, Oliver saw that there were two things protruding from the snake's body which made it look like it had tiny arms. The little stubs even had a few smaller appendages, like fingers. Oliver was extremely confused by what he saw, but he was also intrigued. He had never heard of a snake with hands before. Oliver's fascination with the strange snake got the best of him, and he ended up letting go of the creature's head. All he wanted to do was see if the tiny fingers functioned in the same way as they did in humans. It was a mistake he would come to regret. The snake hissed as it twisted, and before Oliver knew what had happened, the snake bit into his forearm. Oliver pulled the snake off his arm and quickly put it into a box that was lying close by. He called Emily and showed her the wound that was bleeding profusely. His stunned wife ran back into the house and grabbed a few bandages to patch him up. And that was when the debate began. Oliver wanted to take the snake to the vet, but Emily wanted to get him to a hospital. In the end, Oliver managed to convince Emily that it was just a scratch, and she gave in to his request. The couple took the box and drove to the vet, but since they didn't live close to the city, the nearest vet was about an hour away from their home. On the way there, the situation started changing. About halfway through their journey, Oliver started feeling incredibly sick. His arm had swollen to double its original size. His vision was getting fuzzy, and his head was spinning. With each mile that passed beneath them, he seemed to be getting worse, and he started regretting his decision to go to the vet first. But it was already too late. As soon as the vet saw Oliver, he asked his secretary to call an ambulance. The vet took one look at the snake and told Emily that it was poisonous. They had to get Oliver to a hospital before the venom spread further than it already did. He grabbed a bandage and tightly tied it around Oliver's upper arm. A few minutes later, Oliver was loaded into an ambulance and taken to the hospital without the answers he wanted.